Welcome, welcome. So thank you for sharing your thoughts about leadership, and welcome to the ECIS studio. This is a place where we have conversations and connections, and most important, we just share our insight as being an international educator. So we appreciate you being here today. How are we going to connect today? If you want, you can put your Twitter handle in the chat so we can follow each other. And if anybody's who's tweeting today, we're doing the ECS studio. We have a small group today. More people are coming in. I can see the swirly, but we'll be unmuted. Then we want to unmute, just do whatever to get the conversation going. And we are going to be recording, but we do stop recording during the breakout session, so people feel comfortable sharing just what they're feeling and how to connect with others in this room. We are going to be taking questions. Carlos is magnificent. I haven't done the proper introduction yet, but anybody who knows Carlos knows he's a man with sincerity. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, raise your hand. This is the time to get to know Carlos and what he does. And let me give a brief introduction about Carlos. His CV, let's go. His CV is quite extensive. Like, I'm always impressed. Like, I don't know how I'm friends with such a kind and smart man the way he is. Genuinely, when you look at Carlos, and I have to tell you, I met Carlos through a dear friend of mine, John Micton, and Carlos was helping our leadership team with capacity when I was working at the International School of Luxembourg. And his coaching one-on-one and everything he does, he is an executive and performance coach, but also he has worked with other universities and other organizations. These are just some of them in terms of him being international and global. And he does work with international schools as well, not just these organizations, but a lot with leadership teams, looking at capacity building and also doing a lot of one-on-one coaching. I know in Luxembourg, he did quite a bit of coaching. It was during COVID, it was after COVID, and then we realized we needed him even one-on-one after that point. So I thank Carlos for what he did for our leadership team in Luxembourg. This is more of, I mean, his CV could be a book itself. So I just want to say that much. So welcome, Carlos, and we're here to celebrate his book, but I want us to do something while this conversation is going on with Carlos. Is that if you want, I always believe that when you are on a virtual session, there needs to be some type of connection, some type of takeaway that you'll do after this session. So this is called Amplify, Change, and Ditch. And I actually got this from Ewan McIntosh from Notosh. And I just think it's a brilliant protocol that while we're talking today and Carlos is responding to some questions, if you see any practices that resonates, that, you know what, I'm doing that now, but I need to amplify it, write it down, because we are going to have a breakout session. If you see something you're doing that has low impact that needs to change, put it on the change. And if you're seeing something that's just a ditch, like, you know what, I'm doing this practice and it's really not making me an effective leader or not as productive as I could be. And this is so when you leave the session, you actually have a takeaway. So you can draw this and use that when we use our breakout session. So these are some of the questions. I'm going to stop sharing so we can have a conversation, but I wanted to give you an overview of some of the questionings that we're going to be looking at. We're going to talk about what inspired Carlos to write this book. Then we're going to be looking at specific examples in terms of understanding why do you need to know about your brain, neuroscience, and leadership? How is two connected? Then I'm going to ask him the idea of balancing rational and emotional aspects. We know as a leader, we never get emotional. Never, 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 never. I love, I got some smiles there. And then practical tools. That's why you're here. And lastly, what did we hope that Carlos hope that you get from this session? So, and remember, anytime you want to question anything he says, just raise your hand and say, Carlos, I have a question. We have a lovely small group today, so please don't hesitate to share and ask, what do you mean by this, Carlos? So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm actually going to go to the first question, which kind of I want to know as well as Carlos. So first of all, round of applause for Carlos.
Thanks.
We love Carlos. He became a dear friend as well, so I just adore him. Carlos, I read his book, so anybody who hasn't, you can tell I have a few poster notes here. And I have many quotes because a lot what he wrote resonated with me. And let's start off with the obvious. What inspired you to write this book? And how did you become interested with the idea of neuroscience and leadership? So welcome, Carlos, to the ECIS studio. And that's your first question. Please.
Thanks a lot, Nancy. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me here. I'm delighted to be here. I love this kind of audience. I was working, like Nancy said, with international schools in different places, and I always had a great time, and a great time to discuss good things. So let's go straight to the point. Why to connect the brain with leadership? Very simple. And this applies to leaders in any sector, in any place, it's always the same. Concept number one, leadership is a different profession. And normally we do it by the way. So you were working in an organization, and in one moment, one day they say, okay, from today, you have this team. You're in charge of the team. And in general, normally, nobody trains you for that. They consider that you will do it because you should know. This is a mistake. It's a huge mistake. Leadership is a profession that has rules, techniques, tricks, mysteries, let's say, to be solved. And what happened in any organization, people start training in the way. But then there's a lot of casualties in the process. So leadership is not an easy thing, even though it's one of the most complicated professions. The number today, but there are thousands of books about leadership. You just put leadership, I don't know how many will come in Google. So, and we have a saying in medicine, I'm MD, right? So we have a saying, when there are too many treatments for a disease, means no treatment. So nothing works. So that's why people try so many things. Leadership is kind of a similar thing. When there are so many proposals, it's because it's not simple. It's not a simple thing. Because my own background in medicine, and also I was working, let's say, in organizations, in companies, I felt that I could start walking this path of bridging two worlds. Bridging not neuroscience in the technical way. This is not about that. This is about neuroscience in the practical application on human behavior. In the end, it's about human behavior. On this, through the years, in different countries, in different parts, I was living in Europe, in Canada, Latin America. And in one moment, always people ask me, what can I read about this? And to be honest, there are not too many books that connects leadership with neuroscience. So then, I didn't think that one more book was going to be useful, to be honest. But then, in the end, things. So all the information is in the book, is there. Of course, it's in Google, let's say. But my only credit is in the way to connect the dots. There are today so much information that can help us to understand how to talk to each other, how to listen properly, but not only from let's say, the ethical point of view or to be nice. No. Based on how the brain works. If we understand how communication works in the brain, it's a completely moving to a different level. So I want to respond the question, so not to talk about the book, I mean, all at once. What I'm trying to say is, we need, and people are more demanding, to have a kind of more, let me use the word, scientific support regarding human behavior. And this is the purpose of this book, to bring some kind of more solid and in this complex world of human connections. Make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, but give me examples, like, you know what I mean? Like, I love what you're saying because you're talking about behaviors. And many times as a leader, not many times, we are constantly judged by our behaviors and how we engage in situations. I think it was perhaps Caroline who said she's a situational leader, that according to, and I think that was well stated. So give me examples, if you could, the idea of understanding the brain and how it functions, how does that help a leader improve a team's performance?
Excellent. I mean, there are different type, let's say, of model of leadership. Situational one, servant leadership, another one, and transactional leaders. I mean, there are many ways. But I will not go there. This is not about a formula how to be a leader. This is about what a leader should know to be an efficient leader, whatever the style is, because the style will depend on your personality, in the one that you feel more close to. And I like to present, I mean, I was lucky enough to do a TEDx talk where I was talking about the internal team. It's a metaphor that talks about the first stage or the first step to become a good, say a cliche, is to understand myself. But not, I mean, in so profound or philosophical way, that is good, by the way. No. The question is, at the moment I'm talking with somebody, and the moment I'm related with my team, which part of me is in control? I present a model of 5 different brains, but not to go deep on this, it's about evolution, it's about the triune brain of MacLean. I mean, there are different models. What I present is, what we know is that we have instinct, and they are residing in mainly the reptilian brain or the lizard brain. I'm sure you heard about it. We have emotions, that emotions are all over the body, but the truth is that the headquarters is in our second brain here, that we inherit from big mammals. And so emotional things is the third, and one of course, the most powerful in our world, is what we call the rational brain. It's what makes us human beings. But we have more brains. We have neurons in our heart, and we have a whole system in our gut. But let's leave it there. Let's not too complicate it too much. What I'm trying to say is, who is in talk to my team when I refer to me, when I talk to a colleague? Are my emotions? Are my instinct? Or is my rational brain? And there is a concept that is very hard to accept, even though it's a fact. Human brain is not prepared to make 100% rational decision. Human behavior is... Hello? Jacqueline?
Yes, sorry.
No, you want to say something?
No, I think Jacqueline was saying goodnight to her kids.
Yes, I'm still at school and I'm listening in. I'm just saying goodnight to some of the teachers leaving. I'm sorry, I didn't realize my microphone was on.
No worries, Jacqueline. So happy you're here.
Yeah, okay. So what I'm trying to say is, as a human being, we need to understand the real concept or definition of emotions. In every language, we use the word emotional in a negative way. We say somebody's emotional when it's not in control of their emotion.
Yes.
Okay, that's one way, but this is not what I'm referring with emotion. Every single decision that we make in life, as a leader as well, will be driven by our emotions. We like it or not. There's no other way. The switch to make a decision and to action that decision is physically located in the emotional brain. So the rational brain is essential to arrive to conclusions, but to act, we need to pull from emotions. As you know, we can talk about a list of emotion, positive emotion, negative emotion. Of course, the one that will take us to the good place are the positive emotions. And we can define what exactly is to be positive. That is not connected with happiness. It's connected with an attitude of focusing on solutions instead of a problem. So I don't want to derail from your question, Nancy, but what I'm trying to say is we need to understand our internal team. When I say that, is who is in charge. Because, for instance, the reptilian brain is very clever. Is very five the brain that we trust the most, because it's survival there, and we are still alive as a civilization thanks to the reptilian brain. But today it's not helping all the time. But the reptilian brain can hijack the rational brain. What I'm trying to say is, in a practical way, start observing yourself and people around you, because that will determine if a conversation will end a confrontation or will arrive to a good end. Make sense what I'm saying?
It does. I see some people nodding. Does anybody have a question right now? Are we okay in terms of, because my question for you is then how do we as a leader balance between our rational and our emotional aspects of leadership? Because, and I agree with you, I've been told many times that I'm very emotional, and it wasn't a positive. It was always a negative. And I found that actually offensive, because I thought, being an educator, working with students, I'm glad I had emotion. When I'm working with people every day, I'm glad I had an emotion. So, but yet there are certain times where I wonder, how can leaders achieve this balance? And what are, first of all, how do you achieve that balance? And my next, to add on to that, and what are some pitfalls to avoid between the two? So how do I achieve that balance? And what are some pitfalls to avoid?
To be able to manage it, to be in control, the first step is to accept. If we accept that emotions are everywhere, that's a fact, then we can deal with the situation. Emotions, again, can be positive or negative. My positive emotion will use the rational brain in a good way. The reptilian brain will use it in a negative way, to attack, for instance, or to escape. So what we need to know as a leader is how to listen to our teams. What emotions are they expressing when they're talking about Z, Y, or whatever. So what I'm trying to say is we need to be aware of that language. That is what makes the difference as a leader. No emotions. First of all, this is impossible in human behavior, number one. Second, that person is repressing emotions, or let's go to the other extreme of the spectrum, could be a psychopath. So a person and psychopaths are everywhere, and they are leading many companies, and they become presidents, so let's leave it there. So what I'm trying to, so they are very useful. There was an article many years ago, fantastic, about what can we learn from psychopaths. It's amazing. They're amazing people. But there is something missing in the whole process. And what is missing is this regulation based on positive emotions that will make the connection. It's not by chance that EQ, the emotional quotient, became so popular. That was written, 30 years ago, I think, by Goleman. Because emotion is our main challenge in our life, in our leadership style. How do you deal with people in your team? that they are not, let's say, performing well, people that are having X or Y problems, let's say, situation. How do you convince or try to explain everything through the rational brain? Soviet, go if you want. I will not tell you that you're going to be successful. But if you can really empathize in a positive way with what's going on in your team, the results will be absolutely different.
And Carlos, we have a question from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Carlos, I'm absolutely fascinated, and I'm really interested in this idea of we can buy into the emotions, in which case we ride with the emotions of our team, and that can be tricky.
Yes.
We can observe the emotions and try to have a kind of sort of dispassionate, or we can become a psychopath where we shut out all the emotions. Is this trainable in ourselves?
It's a great question, Sarah. I would say yes. The answer is yes. And what I'm finding in my career as a coach, let's say, and I'm giving all these presentations, is that the big gap is the understanding of the system. So I'm aiming the wrong target. I'm supposed to be very rational. No, you don't supposed to be rational because you can't. You will use your rational brain. But again, please, I will repeat it, and sorry if I repeat myself. When I talk about emotion, or let's say empathizing with my team's emotion, doesn't mean we will cry together in the corner. Okay, this is not about that. This is about, if I don't understand what is emotion, what kind of emotion is driven that behavior, I cannot help. I want to add, I don't know, Sarah, if I'm responding your question, but what I'm trying to say is understanding how the system works helps a lot. And that is trainable. Can I change the behavior of a psychopath? I don't know. And I through life, even though I say it became quite expert in coaching difficult personalities. But when I'm introduced to this difficult personality, let's call it bullies, because they're bullies. Find out as much as I can if it's a psychopath, because if it's a psychopath, forget it. I'm not there. Because it's manipulative, and that if you don't want to change, forget it. This is about will in the end. But when I coach, happen also in international school, that has this kind of too directive personality, or that can take it as too intrusive. In that sense, the first question is, what do you want? Do you really want to understand how the process works in yourself, and then to tweak in a way that will connect better with the rest? Yes, that is trainable. The will needs to be there. That's the only condition.
And the understanding, and the more we understand, the better we have the choice. I love it. Thank you.
So, Sarah, for instance, what I observe through my work is when I explain, today we don't have time, of the 5 brains and how they work and how they influence each other, people say, wow, now I understand a lot of situations in my company. And so it's like, it's the first step. I mean, this kind of education is basic. And I know that there is a program in several, you know better than me, that they are introducing basic neuroscience in elementary school. So to explain to kids about this kind of emotions and all this stuff. And they start behaving differently. You don't need to be a neuroscientist to leverage this knowledge. You can be in elementary school and you will take advantage if you understand how the system works. Make sense?
I love what you're saying, just understanding first, understanding who you are and understanding the system.